message come up and like, oh dear. Good morning, everybody. All right. Oh, this morning we're going to be talking. We're going back to Doge because, guys,
Hey,
guess
Chris,
what
which
you got?
microphone are you on? You sound muddy.
Uh, so there's Cameron.
Yeah,
He says I
sorry.
sound muddy.
Yeah, blown out and muddy, almost like you're not on the good mic. I mean, I say this as I talk to you from like I paid $59.99 for this entire deal here, so who am I to cast aspersions? However, had I bought a nice microphone, I would insist upon using it.
Absolutely. So did that sound like I made the change correctly?
Yeah, now you just need a little more gain. You're very quiet, but
gain.
Yep.
How about that?
Now I can hear you. Now let's see what the chat says. While we're waiting on the chat, how you doing this morning?
Live chat, comment on the quality of our audio.
Well, come on the quality of his audio, because there's not really shit I can do about mine.
Right, he just has to sit there and suck. But I can be awesome. I
would make a comment, but then the cheeseburger would pop up and would totally just like destroy our chat
all day. So I see Megan's joined us. Cindy says she hears us 5x5. Good morning, Cindy. Fish and Golf is with us, and I see Be Controversial, our new favorite supporter. Excellent. So we're going to talk about Doge a little bit more this morning, and I'll be frank with you. There's a handful of reasons that we're talking about it, not least of which is yesterday's video, which was related to Doge. We're talking mostly about the corrupt judges surrounding the orders on Doge. Jason says low volume coming from my mic, but I don't know if he's behind from after I turned up the gain. There's a little bit more gain to be had, but I don't want to blow it out either. Anyway, so yesterday my wife cracked a joke using the pun about Doge ball, and that I just could not resist. So we are in part doing this episode just so I could make this thumbnail. And then, of course, thankfully,
happy wife, happy life.
Absolutely. But I also got a great excuse pop across the news feed yesterday to cover Doge again. In the Doge just revealed yesterday that it discovered that last week, FEMA spent $59 million, a little more than almost $60 million on luxury hotels in New York for illegal aliens, for hostile foreign invaders. Now, understand what I said there. I did not say that as of last week, Doge discovered that FEMA has spent $60 million over some indeterminate period of time. No. They discovered that FEMA spent $60 million last week, which means not only is that FEMA engaged in an absolute continuation of the same fraud, waste, and abuse that we were told not 6 months ago was pure conspiracy theory, right? We'll get back to that in just a second. We were told not 6 months ago that was pure conspiracy theory, but they have been ordered precisely not to do that by Donald Trump's executive orders. They are standing and operating in clear defiance of the law, right?
When I first heard this, buddy, the first thing that I thought of was, and I might have some of the details wrong, everybody, but when the shit went down in North Carolina, that whole like minor hurricane thing that washed away entire mountainsides, weren't the Amish like, hey guys, we could teach you how to pop up a basic bitch log cabin in 24 hours so you can at least move back to your property and start cleaning it up yourself. And the government was like, no, you can't do that. That's totally not safe. So the same FEMA that won't let you pop up a shack and and allow you to go piss in the woods so that you could take a chainsaw to your property. This is the same FEMA that will put illegal illegal immigrants into hotel rooms, and and I'm not trying to steal your thunder here, Chris, because I know this is where you were building to anyway, but that just seems like such a deliberate slap in the face. If you want to argue that the government has a legitimate function, well, spending the taxpayers' dollars back on the taxpayers, you could make an argument that that's a legitimate function. So you've got people in California, you've got people in North Carolina that have legitimately had their lives 100% disrupted. It's difficult to imagine a scenario that could be more devastating. We can't put them in hotels, but we can totally put illegal immigrants into hotel rooms because they have to have their due process and their human rights and all of that. It just, it's a slap in the face. Absolute.
Well, so the dude makes a comment down here. He says hotels weren't making money, so they just filled them with the illegals and got paid. That's America capitalism.
I don't blame the hotels. If I was a hotel owner and the government came along and was like, "Hey, man, you seem to average having 10 empty rooms every night. You want to fill them up?" I'd say, yes.
Right, exactly. So this is the opposite of capitalism. Like the let's go back to the idea of too big to fail. Too big to fail? That is the opposite of capitalism. That is in fact fascism, right? The lefties like to call us fascists, and they've done this thing, right? And this also goes to the argument for abolishing the Department of Education, because they've done this thing. Most of you were taught in school to essentially understand the world as having communism is the absolute extreme far left, and Nazism, which is the same as fascism. Keep in mind, what I'm saying right now, what I'm expressing right now are not actual facts. They are the things that you were taught. So communism is the most extreme left position, and Nazism, which is identical to fascism, is the most extreme right that one can go. This is false. This is a lie, right? Now, some conservatives, especially small government conservatives bordering on right libertarian, will try and explain that more like, okay, no, to be a liberal, to be a left-wing liberal, you have to be dedicated to the furthest left proposition, which is communism. And they might even somewhat correctly lump Nazism and fascism in with that, and then argue that the furthest right you can go is absolute, complete, and total anarchy, complete lack of government, that there is no government, and everybody blah 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 blah. The fact is, conservatism, the right, conservatism is about the conservation of. That's why it gets confusing. I've explained this on the show before, but that's why it gets confusing when you talk about politics in America versus politics everywhere else. Because in America, the thing that we are conservative of is the most liberal document ever written. And I mean liberal in the traditional sense of the word. The idea that what a Democrat is a liberal is an abuse of the language meant to confuse you and cause you harm. The federal government is constrained by the Constitution, which explicitly defines the individual roles of the organs of that body. And it sets it out very clearly. And it is very clear that whatever is not explicitly enumerated as an authority to the federal government is an authority which does not belong to the federal government. They do not have that power. So a conservative, a proper conservative, believes, at least to some extent, that we need some measure, not of rule, not of governance. We need some measure of mechanism which allows the individual free people of this country to have their mutual interests considered and served by an elected body because we're busy. We got shit to do. That's why we hire people to go and talk about the stuff we don't have time to worry about. That
way I could just go to work on Monday and don't have to think about it. Oh, okay. You're going to pass all the legislative bills for me. You're going to make sure that the correct amount of money gets allocated to the military and these sorts of things.
And the only thing I want my government to do is to secure the sovereignty and security of this nation. You'll notice I didn't mention law enforcement or judges in there. If I had my way, the courts would be a private entity. If you had a dispute with another private citizen, you would hire a judge who was a private contractor to adjudicate and make a determination. And that determination would be enforced through contract, and any necessary violence involved in that enforcement, which should be minimal, would be done either through personal action or through the hiring of a private security firm. But at the end of the day, the police force related to that is largely unnecessary because, I'm getting way off here.
Then you can bring it back. Reeling you in.
FBI stuff, and that's something that I do want to talk about soon, and why we should not dissolve and replace the FBI. But we can get back to that later. So I'm gonna do this to bring it back around. I'm gonna go ahead and pop up the article about FEMA from the New York Post. So here we go. Elon Musk claims FEMA sent $59 million last week to luxury New York City hotels for illegal migrants. Excuse me. But City Hall says there's more to the story. Okay, real quick. City Hall is lying.
Well, I'm sure there's more to the story. There always is. Man, brother, seriously, go to any jail in the country, and I promise, all them dudes that are locked up have got reasons or circumstances or whatever. Like there's always more to the story. And let's just assume for a moment that there's actually some form of a legitimate argument to be made here. Let's just for the sake of argument, let's assume that. Part of what makes politics is optics. And these are bad optics. The optics here are such that it is difficult to interpret anything other than this is defiance and this is a deliberate insult. So even if City Hall has a good reason, somebody with a brain should have looked at it and said, yeah, look, we can't keep doing this. Because the entire country right now is on the warpath for waste, fraud, and abuse. And even if this is not waste, fraud, and abuse, it's going to look like waste, fraud, and abuse. If you've ever been in a job where you act as an agent for another person, where you have fiduciary responsibility to another person, like if you're a lawyer or maybe an insurance agent or a financial planner, anything like that.
The appearance of impropriety is impropriety.
That's where I was going. Yeah, if the appearance of impropriety is impropriety, and to put that more simply, I heard somebody say once, look, if it looks shady, it probably is shady.
Mm-hmm.
So don't do anything that looks shady, and you've got 99% of your bases covered. And this looks shady. This looks shady as hell. And it doesn't just look shady. It looks like a deliberate insult.
Yeah, it looks like somebody at FEMA sat down and said, how can I be as rogue? How can I go as far off the reservation as possible? I have made an affirmative choice to turn my organization into a rogue state, into a rogue act.
To
resist. Yeah. They put up the pink power fist to resist.
Man, could you picture like all those black leaders from the 50s and 60s rolling over in their graves?
Yeah, and you know what? I could not be happier to watch. Hey, Doge is a full contact sport, and now we're seeing all those fist pumpers out there getting absolutely the fisted that they wanted.
No, oh God, no. That I'm not going to make any jokes.
You're fair. It's kind of like the Batman thing. It may not be the fisted that they wanted, but it is the fisted that they deserved. I could do this all day. Let's go back to the article. Elon Musk threatened to claw back $59 million. He said the Federal Emergency Management Agency sent last week to luxury hotels in New York City to house illegal migrants, a claim that City Hall officials rebutted on Monday. Let me remind you guys, right? Like I said, not 6 months ago, we were told that this wasn't happening. Of course, we were told that it was happening. And when I say we were told that it was happening, remember, Alejandro Mayorkas came out in commentary on the Helene disaster and the Milton disasters, and said FEMA is about to run out of money, and right. And remember, this is someone whose personal self-interest is wrapped up in denying these facts. He said that we're going to run out of money for these American disaster victims because we spent it all on hostile foreign invaders. Now, he probably said something like undocumented workers or asylum seekers, legal asylees, or some nonsense like that. But he basically put it out there, and he said, we're going to run out of money because we spent it all on criminal aliens.
Yeah, he let the cat out of the bag.
He said the quiet part out loud.
That's right.
And then we got the revelation that not only was our Federal Emergency Management Agency out of money that is meant to be spent on emergencies for Americans, right? The mandate of FEMA is not to go to Chile and solve the crisis after a tsunami comes through. There are other organizations for that. FEMA is a domestic organization intended to help with disaster relief inside the United States. Well,
hell, Chris, it might not. USAID actually isn't USAID at all. So who knows? Maybe we've just been wrong about what FEMA is and does this entire time.
Well, okay, so
I'm just making a joke. I'm not trying to derail you.
You're kind of right. Subtle distinction. The charter of FEMA says that it's supposed to be there for solving domestic crises, whereas the charter of USAID has nothing to do with providing aid and assistance. In fact, the word aid does not appear in the name. It is called, and I know you know this, Cameron, but I'm explaining it for the audience. The word aid does not appear in the name. It is the United States Agency for International Development. And that was done very carefully and very intentionally to misguide people and confuse them. I've been trying to explain this to people for years. There is no such thing as U.S. foreign aid. Everything that you think falls under the category of U.S. foreign aid is essentially global political manipulation and money laundering, funding CIA operations that the CIA knows they can't get approved through the normal approval process. It's so that the CIA and other delinquent clandestine agencies can take actions that they're otherwise forbidden from taking, right? So,
yeah, but it's too dirty for the CIA. Farm it out to USAID.
Exactly.
It'll be fine. It'll be fine. This is all fine. Nah, it'll be fine.
Yeah. Is it dirtier than faking a hooker ring to hide your clandestine operations in a foreign country under an otherwise seemingly legitimate hotel? If it's dirtier than that, it's for USAID.
So how many of those How many of those basic bitch log cabins that the Amish know how to build, you think 59 million could have built?
Probably 59,000.
Yeah, something like that would be my guess.
And subtle correction, and it's facts matter. In all fairness, it was not FEMA that prevented the people from living in the tiny houses that the Amish built. Those were the local city governments in North Carolina. The individual city governments reps stepped in and said, you can't live in these houses. What was really going on there is the Amish were delivering essentially emergency aid relief in the form of tiny houses. And because the nature of the tiny houses is they're sheds, because they don't have modern insulation, plumbing, electricity, there's no real requirement there. And so the cities were pissed off that they were missing out on the revenue generated by licensing and inspections. And it's like, no. You can't be happy and healthy and saved from disaster and sleeping out in the cold in a week for nothing. It has to cost you thousands of dollars, and it has to take 6 months to a year. That's the process. That's what we want.
This is comparable to the situation in California, though. Yes, it's local governments that often put the brakes on these things, but all of this is top down. Like, we've learned from everything from the Hunter Biden laptop and everything since then that there is this nexus between social media and big business and local governments and the federal government, where it's like the amorphous warfare concept. Nobody has to tell anybody else, okay, what I want for you to do is to throw up a bunch of bureaucracy so that we can slow this process down, so that I can make sure my people get in and get to clean up the disaster. Yes, they're distinct organizations, but the people that run them tend to all know each other and tend to all share a common worldview. So can you say on paper that FEMA prevented this from happening? No. But can you say that the same people being involved and having the same mentality, I know how to run your life better than you? Well, that I would argue, yes, it's the exact same thing. And for better or worse, the federal government has more power than, I mean, even if you look historically, our federal government has more power than just about any institution that's ever existed in all of recorded history. So if the federal government is staffed by people that want to tell you how to live your life, man, the smaller government, it's how you get the people that you want to move up into the federal government, right? Like, you run for your local city council, then you run for local Congress, then you run for big boy Congress, and you do that by being in lockstep.
Run for coroner, even though you're scared to death of dead bodies and can't smell. You remember that one?
Yeah, I remember that one.
Was that Conyers or Covington? That was Covington.
That was somewhere close by. That was
the county coroner about 4 or 5 years ago, I think.
So when are you going to take the body away? Wait, I have to take the body away? Me?
What did you think a coroner was?
So before we just keep spinning off, are there more details in the article?
Let's get through. We've gotten 2 paragraphs into this article. Trump last month signed an executive order to create a council to review FEMA as he expressed concerns over serious concerns of political bias in the agency. Now, remember, we had kind of a perfect storm of storms. We had the Helene and Milton disasters, which almost exclusively affected largely Trump voting areas. Like the area where I live, we got hit. Guys, we are inland middle Georgia, right? It's a 4-hour drive to the closest body of salt water, right? Well, 3 hour, 2 hour, 2-3 hours. It's we're inland,
far enough away where a hurricane shouldn't be a thing on your radar.
right? Where like, okay, we notice if there's a hurricane that hits the coast, right? We get some rain and wind. It was still a Category 1 hurricane when it went through my yard, right? That's a thing that happens. That's a 100-year storm, right? That's why in insurance terms we refer to it as the 100-year floodplain, because it doesn't ever happen, right? If you live 99 years, there's a good chance that you missed it. So we had one of those, and Milton was ostensibly gearing up to be even worse. They both ended up being just absolute disastrous landfalls for both of those, going through Trump country right before the election. And then you had the wildfires. Right now, there's a big difference between the wildfires and the hurricane. There's nothing we can do about a hurricane, right? Except for build houses that are expected to survive. That they have various safety features, extra strong storm windows, et cetera, et cetera. Trim the trees around the house so they don't fall on you, et cetera. So that you're not getting totally fucked when the wind comes through. But you can't stop the hurricanes from happening. California had wildfires, and the wildfires were dramatically worse than they needed to be, precisely because California has gone out of its way to not do the obvious things that need to be done. They didn't do anything beforehand to mitigate the severity of not possible, not probable. No. The insurance augurs with their 32-sided dice and sheepskins said it will happen. So much that the insurance company said, we out. And California did not do the mitigation. And then when the firefighters showed up, there was no water there. Mayorkas and Biden told us that we're out of money because FEMA spent all our money on illegal aliens. And then Biden said the U.S. government will pay 100% for the damages in the LA wildfires. And in the middle of all that, we had the controversy where FEMA got caught with their hands in the cookie jar, emailing and saying, hey, it is the official policy of FEMA, handed down by the leadership, that we do not serve homes that have Trump signs in the front yard that advertise for Donald Trump because they're violent people and we don't feel safe. And that's a whole kettle of worms. If you see a political sign and it makes you feel unsafe, you are not competent to hold a job of any kind.
I don't know, brother. When I see that sign in the yard that says, in this house, we believe love is love, I'm like, oh, okay. No human being is illegal. Oh, God. I don't necessarily feel safe. Like those. I'm making a joke.
I understand the joke. I do. But yeah, I mean, the sign doesn't make me feel unsafe. It makes me feel, pity.
Yes, pity's a good word. That is the word. It's like, oh, you're one of them. Oh God, I'm so sorry they did this to you.
Yeah, it just makes me want to ask them, God, who hurt you?
Yeah. Show me on the doll where Trump touched you.
I mean, we should do a whole episode on that sign, especially we believe love is love. No, you don't. The statement, I believe love is love, is I believe that illicit sex with minors is morally and ethically identical to monogamous reproductive sex between a traditional married couple. You don't believe that love is anything. You believe that all sex is morally identical, and that makes you a dangerous human being.
So, we've got somebody in the chat, Nude Guru, who has been adding a lot of just like super awesome
Yeah, Nude Guru comes to us. I believe Nude Guru. He's been watching for a while. I want to say I ran into Nude Guru doing live streams with Anarchy Television. It was either with Anarchy or back in the day when Alex frickin' Jones used to come on.
Anyhow, Nude Guru
for a while. Yes.
Has said government has zero power over those who take full responsibility for their lives, and there is both your root problem and remedy in the same sentence. So philosophically speaking, I would agree with that. The problem is in practice, that's not how our world works.
Right.
And that's part of what Trump tapped into all the way back in 2015 when he first started floating the idea of seriously running for president. And now we've kind of come full circle and we've realized just look at the last 5 years. Government's supposed to have zero power over your life. Government is supposed to really not even be necessary if you're willing to take the steps necessary to take care of yourself. But hell, pick an example. Pick all the stuff with COVID, for example. When states like Georgia and Florida wanted to say, man, this lockdown stuff is bullshit. Yeah, no, we're done doing that. Brian Kemp said specifically, I trust Georgians to make the best decisions for themselves and their own lives. That's why we're going to start opening everything back up. And he essentially said, look, yeah, there's this disease that we don't entirely understand, but somebody still has to make the donuts. So if there are people that want to risk going out and making the donuts, what right does the government have to stop them from doing that?
Right.
And so, but the fact that it could even have been an issue in the first place, the fact that the government can do things like lean on social media companies, can basically threaten and intimidate Mark Zuckerberg into censoring certain things, can threaten and intimidate X into banning people that even mention Hunter Biden's laptop, which turned out to be a totally real fucking story. Russian misinformation. Ooh, really? That was Russian misinformation? No, it actually ended up being a very real thing that affected the outcome of an election.
It warmed my heart, the cockles of my heart. In fact, deep down in like the subcockle region of my heart was deeply warmed when Donald Trump said, yeah, those 51 intelligence officers, former intelligence officers, they're former as fuck now. Your clearances are revoked, bitches.
Yeah, so
they caught the Doge ball to the dome.
So part of what this has revealed is that everything that we hate, and there's a lot of people that knew something was wrong, but because they go and they live their lives, they work their job, their 2 jobs, their 3 jobs, and still parent their children and go to church and show up for the baseball games and all that. As we lived our lives, we knew something was wrong. We just said, man, the debt just keeps getting bigger.
Jason Bryan is watching soccer games.
Sure. But we knew something was wrong. We couldn't necessarily give it name. Most people don't have the time or the inclination to even go beyond the first layer of what is going on behind the scenes, how the sausage was made. And now Doge is exposing it and it's giving it names. If you want to really effectively communicate something, you have to be able to put it on a bumper sticker. And what Doge is doing is making bumper stickers out of all of this absolutely retarded shit that our government has been involved with. Like, for example, spending $59 million to put illegal immigrants into hotels. And well, hey, look, man, luxury hotels. Well, actually, it was Motel 6. Okay, fine, it's still a hotel room. Or hey, man, all the other hotels were full up. Yeah, but you still put them in it, and that's why. I know you talked about this yesterday, but I'm a big believer that judge's order freezing Elon Musk temporarily out of the Treasury Department, that all that about protecting people's personal data, like, oh, well, the specifics of your financial transactions and your social security number, that's not necessary to do this work. Yeah, that sounds good. That sounds like a good reason. But the real reason it was being done was so that they could shred a few more documents before.
Yeah, so for anybody that's confused here, the guys that were given access to the data through the Treasury were Treasury employees already. And that judge's order has restricted access, completely shut off access to the Treasury data. And that's all it is, access to the data for the purposes of the audit, right? Has that restriction has even shut out the new Treasury Secretary. According to that judge's order, the Secretary of the Treasury is also not allowed to access the data in his agency. Right?
And
I mean, it's psychotic.
So is there any more of this article we're gonna get through?
Well, yes. There's another piece of this that I really want to touch on. This. A clawback demand will be made to recoup those funds, says Elon, right? That is sexy. Hey, Cameron, you ever sold a life insurance policy that got canceled after you got your commission?
Yep, and that's a bad day. That'll wreck your paycheck, because insurance companies don't like when that happens.
Hey, Danny. Hey, Sergeant Major. Hey, any of you guys that are veterans, you ever get overpaid while you were active duty? Government comes back for that money. So why is it that we've never heard about the government uncovering fraud, waste, and abuse and then recouping that money? There should be a subcategory of Doge or a subdepartment of Doge whose job it is, after Doge identifies fraud, waste, and abuse, to go and recoup that money.
Oh, well, there's an easy answer.
I'm talking about somebody walking around and knocking on the door and saying, hey, Politico, $31.4 million? Really? Get your checkbook out.
Well, there's an easy answer to that question. If you claw back fraudulent dollars, you're admitting to a crime. Like that's a confession of guilt. You don't try and cure a financial transaction unless there was something wrong with it in the first place.
Well, that's a fair point. And that's why there should be a department dedicated to doing that. Because obviously U.S. aid isn't going to try and recoup the 31 or I forget, it's either 34.1 or 31.4 over time to Politico, and millions more to other similar organizations, similar news companies. But yeah, American Pravda should absolutely essentially be paying down America's debt right now.
Yeah, but I suspect that the longer this goes on, the more of this we're going to find. And just like we've had these things happen over the past couple of years that have actually penetrated some left-wing bubbles, this may actually be the final boss of penetrating the liberal bubble. Like,
they're penetrating the bureaucracy.
Look, how would you feel? Seriously, how would you feel if the environment was your biggest issue, for example? you're a sincere believer in the dangers of climate change, and you actually dedicate your free time and any excess capital you have toward fighting climate change. You go the whole nine. You green up your own house as much as possible. Like you actually live your values
Right.
in to a huge degree, and then you find out that the thing that's supposed to be your biggest ally, the United States federal government, is actually using climate change as a wedge issue so they can insert themselves into countries all over the world just for propaganda purposes. How would you feel if you discovered that? Well, I would be pissed. Here's my pet issue. That's yes. I, I would be pissed. So, and the more of this stuff that Doge puts out in bumper sticker form, the better. The one thing that I'm afraid of is that there's going to be such a fire hose of this sort of bullshit that people are going to numb out to it.
Yeah. Well, maybe. Essentially, what you just said is we're going to get tired of winning.
Getting tired of winning. No, I don't. Maybe that's what I'm saying, but I don't think that's what I'm saying. What I think that I'm saying is, you ever you ever go back and talk to an old girlfriend and try and figure out whose fault the relationship is that it ended? And yeah, that's a conversation that goes nowhere. And I'm worried that this could happen. The other thing that I'm worried about is so many things have been created just by executive fiat, like USAID or the DACA program. And somehow, even though they get created by presidents, they just sort of stick around forever and keep getting funded. The other thing that I'm worried about is Doge itself being a weapon that gets used against us later. At some point, all this stuff is going to work its way through the courts. All these judges that are going to deliberately try and slow the process down, they're all going to run out of options. And when that happens, they could weaponize the very same thing against us. Now, I still believe that Elon Musk and his team of 19-year-old big balls autists are doing the Lord's work. Sincerely believe that. But between the fact that we're going to get just inundated with, this is not the last time we're going to find out that the government spent $59 million on something absolutely retarded. It's not. It's not. So
No, not. Okay.
But still, it's worth highlighting.
I'm going to push back on you a little bit on three things. First, okay, so I don't disagree with you that people will become numb to it, but I'm going to make the argument that it's a good thing. And here's why. Guys like us, guys that watch shows like this, the people who voted for Donald Trump are not going to get tired of the adrenaline, of the adrenaline rush, the dopamine bump of reading a headline, Donald Trump obliterates useless government entity. Boom. The other side is going to get tired of seeing it. And that will inure them to the emotional damage being caused by us dismantling their corrupt kleptocracy over time. And so we're going to look at a snowball effect here that shifts culture in the direction of the right, because the more they get beat down, the less they'll resist. The more resistance is beat down, the less resistance will pop up. The less resistance there is, the more quickly and effectively and efficiently Doge and Trump will move forward, eliminating these wasteful programs and corrupt bureaucratic entities. And so I think you're right that some people will get numb to it. but it'll be the right people, and it'll have a positive sine wave feedback loop effect that is very, very good for us tactically.
God, I hope you're right, because I almost feel like you're transitioning to that preacher clip, but I hope you're right.
I am. Damn, there were three things I wanted to push back on. And then you said something about being concerned that essentially the creation of Doge will come back to bite us in the ass, right? And it's an old saw. It is that, well, if we do X, like if we get rid of the filibuster, then when the other party gets in power, they'll benefit from us doing the thing. If we do the right thing here, then when the other party gets into power, they'll use this new weapon, this new power, this new authority, this new department, this whatever against us. But here's the thing. For one, the things that we as conservatives want to do and create are not things that can be used against us by the enemy. If the left wants to come in and use Doge to root out government corruption, awesome. I'd be totally comfortable with a department under Joe Biden that was going around slashing programs. And I do mean programs. But the other kinds of things that Republicans try to put in place are things like, you know what? We need voter ID on the blockchain, total election security, go. Right? How do you, the only way you can turn something like that against us, and this is true of just about everything that and I'm qualifying this, legitimate conservatives want, are things that can only be used nefariously if they are corrupted, right? A good example, kind of from the other side of this, McConnell said, if you change these rules, we're going to bring it around and bite you in the ass with it. And that's how he kept Merrick Garland off the Supreme Court, right? And so one of the problems that we see with Republicans over time generally is that they are afraid to wield power for exactly the reason of the argument that you're making, that if we do the thing, then it'll open the floodgates for the Democrat to use the thing against us. And so we should not use the authority that we have to correct the evils that are happening for fear that we will empower different evils in the future. And the result is that we continue to watch them commit acts of evil and do nothing about it for fear that we will create a weapon that can be used against us in order to stop that evil. So we just let the evil go.
Look, let me be clear. I'm not suggesting that we don't do the work that needs doing. Not for a second am I saying that. I'm simply trying to look forward and realize, like, okay, there probably needs to be some kind of a sunset provision on Doge.
There is.
Well, but is there really? Because at the moment, and like, let's say Doge is supposed to be terminated in a year. Well, what if the work is not done in a year? Like, it'll get extended. I'm merely trying to just say these are the things we need to be vigilant about, and that a Democrat could become president and create an equivalent, and they could eliminate things that they claim are fraud, waste, and abuse. Like, they have no problem. They have no problem lying, using the language to trick us. Like, I keep calling it USAID to be cheeky. It's not USAID. It's spelled USAID, so we'll think that it's USAID. Like, Mark Levin has this fantastic rant that I've listened to a few times just because it makes me chuckle. But he's like, hey, the Department of Energy doesn't create a single watt of energy. Like, just like the most recent example, the Affordable Care Act. It didn't make healthcare more affordable. It made it more expensive.
Right.
So anyhow, That's I was just putting that out there. That's all. Not saying we shouldn't do it.
The sunset thing, real quick on Doge, it's an 18-month plan, but it's not just an 18-month plan. It's not just they said, hey, we're only going to do it for 18 months. We promise. Because of the nature of the executive order. So the original department of U.S. Digital Services that was repurposed to become Doge. So now it's U.S. Doge Services. And Elon was put in place there. That was done with an executive order. And since it wasn't done through an act of Congress, it can be done by an executive order, but it cannot be made permanent without an act of Congress. And so the law already provides for its necessary dissolution after 18 months, unless an argument is put before Congress to make the position more permanent. So the sunset there is already baked in. Now, sure, they could say whatever they want to say and then do something else later, but that's part of what I was saying a minute ago. The kinds of things that Republicans ask for us to do, that Republicans and conservatives ask for the government to do, are the kinds of things like voter ID that cannot be weaponized against us unless they are corrupted. And the argument that we should not take particular actions because the left will use them against us. Let's not mix words. The left is going to use every lever that exists and create more and corrupt them irreparably, whether we take actions or not. So we can either take actions and stop them and slow them down, or we can sit back and watch them progress. What we cannot do is prevent them from doing evil in the future, because evil is the thing that it is in their nature. It's what they do.
Look, just to be clear, like would you decide to fight back against the bully, you are creating a problem. Now, necessary problem, sure. Like we made the joke before, like violence doesn't solve any problems except for all the problems that it does solve. Like that's, and I'm clear on all that.
Except for every problem that's ever been written about in a history book.
Yeah. Like actually violence solves a lot of problems. And hey, look. There's a transition. You want to talk about violence solving problems?
Violence.
Can we just watch the whole thing and then circle back, because this is
done.
And in this nation, I'm worried that we are on the verge of bloodshed. This is an attempt to take us back to a day that we do not want to go, and we will not go. So therefore, there will be conflict. I pray that the peace of God will win out and overcome the madness that is attempting to take over this nation. And I will say to you, beloved, no one likes violence, but sometimes violence is necessary. When Elon Musk forces his way into the United States Treasury and threatens to steal your personal information and your Social Security check, there is the possibility of violence. Sometimes the devil will act so ugly that you have no other choice but to get violent and fight. Well, someone might say, now, Reverend, you shouldn't be talking about violence. This isn't the Christian thing to do. Well, I will say, why not talk this way? Because Jesus did. Jesus said in this key verse, didn't it? The kingdom of heaven suffers what? Violence. And the who? The violent take it by force. The kingdom of God is a war zone. It is a battlefield. You did know this, right?
Okay. Lock him up. This preacher. Okay, first off, guys, it's hard to know where to start, but I'm going to start with this one. He explicitly mentions Elon Musk, right? He explicitly mentions Elon Musk, who is a public political figure,
stealing your Social Security check. Jesus.
Politics, and says he's going to steal your Social Security checks. That is a lie. He is lying to his congregation, right? On that alone, he should no longer be a pastor. But on this next point, he is speaking on politics. He is proselytizing on politics in the pulpit in his church. That is a crime. Danny says instigating a riot is a crime. Calling for violence in this way is a crime. But even without the violence, and we're going to talk mostly about that, but I wanted to cover this. I wanted to get to this first. He is explicitly speaking about politics and proselytizing his congregation with partisan politics from the pulpit. That is an explicit revocation of your tax exempt status as a religious organization. You are not supposed to be allowed to talk about politics. But we have a long tradition in this country. If you go to a black church or a church in a very liberal area, they go beyond proselytizing. Candidates go there. Kamala Harris did it. Kamala Harris went to churches and spoke to the congregation. That is illegal. That is a crime. But we let them get away with it because they're black. And if you prosecute a black person for crimes, that makes you a racist. Now, hopefully, we'll see that trend start to back off a little bit, and we can start prosecuting criminals without worrying ourselves over what color they are. But this preacher feels secure to commit crime on camera because he believes, and not wrongly, that he is inured to the consequences of that criminal activity by the dint of his skin color, because he can count on the institutional racism of the United States of America to prefer his criminal activity to the criminal activity or just dispreferred activity of his white counterparts.
Yeah, so this is the kind of thing that leads to assassination attempts against Donald Trump. Because if we're talking about Hitler, and that's what he is, he's Cheeto Hitler, right? He's terrible and a fascist, and we must resist and all that other nonsense. It's okay to take a shot at Hitler because you're stopping Hitler. And you can say a lot of things about this particular preacher, but he's clearly not stupid. Because if you pay very close attention to what he says, he never directly calls for violence. In fact, he's very explicit. I pray for the peace of God. If you were to put him in front of a jury and say, okay, do you think he's guilty? Do you think he's trying to incite a riot?
Oh,
His lawyers,
guys like me don't make it on juries.
Well, no, honestly, I could even see a world where if I'm on the jury, the free speech is so important and the ability to say certain things is so important and the exact words that you choose is also important. His lawyers would argue, and I think successfully, they're like, hey, look, this whole thing was couched in terms of he doesn't want this to happen. That he was just trying to hold up the most extreme example possible as a moral agent. That he never told anybody to go commit violence. He said don't commit violence. And again, this is one of those tactics of the left. They do seem to really understand how words work.
Right. But, rather than explicitly calling for violence, what he did is he got up there, he shook the Bible, and he said, Jesus wants you to murder Donald Trump.
Right. And he said it without saying it.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
He got up there and intentionally inferred that Christ wants you to conduct a revolutionary war against the current administration of the United States of America.
So you said earlier that as the resistance got more and more beat down, their capacity to resist in kind of a sine wave pattern would start to erode. But I'm more worried that we're going to go on a roller coaster and things will trend in a good direction. But there are going to be some
worried about that because their funding just dried up.
And you're not wrong.
That's not just a reference to U.S. aid, right? We saw less protests around D.C. For Trump's inauguration this time. The first time Trump was inaugurated, they set D.C. on fire. Nobody talks about it anymore, but I mean, there were riots, there were car fires, there were building fires, there were murders. I mean, they went absolutely insane. Well, this time around, the powers that be in the enemy left decided that basically there was no profit margin there, so they didn't want to waste their money on it. Because for one, they already know that Donald Trump isn't running for a third term.
Yeah, but God willing, like JD Vance will be the and I'm going to say fourth term because we all know what happened in 2020. But okay, so as just to use a really
Biden,
right. But to use a really extreme example and to deliberately tie it into religion, the vast majority of Muslims are not suicide bombers. And I know this because there are still like 1 billion Muslims on the planet. And if most of them were suicide bombers, there'd be no more Muslims, Right.
Most of them support suicide bombers, but.
Well, support. Look, that's not where I'm going with this. Where I'm going with this is the tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of them that are willing to do it so radically alter course for everything for those people that there doesn't have to be that many of them. They change the social fabric of the societies they live in just by existing, just by the possibility existing. So it will not take that many people, and we see this. We see this in reaction to left-wing, to right-wing politicians. Left-wing people freak out. Remember that time Steve Scalise almost died because a Bernie bro lost his shit and actually thought he was doing the right thing by trying to assassinate U.S. senators?
Because every talking head on the right ran to a microphone to say, "Oh, we don't need to blame Bernie for this." Fuck you. This is Bernie's fault. Bernie did this. Bernie pulled that trigger personally.
Well, while I don't know that I would necessarily agree with that, I understand the intent of that statement, and am more than happy to point out that that is the exact same standard that would be applied to us. Exactly. If one of our guys did something crazy, they'd say, "Oh, this is Donald Trump's fault." Yeah, they'd say it in a heartbeat. This is JD Vance's fault or whatever. So
the NRA killed those children. Bullshit.
So yeah, exactly.
But if that's the standard, then every trans surgeon murdered all the kids at the Christian school, right? Every homosexual was responsible for the Pulse nightclub shooting. Every Democrat was personally responsible for all of the assassination attempts against Donald Trump, and they deserve absolutely zero benefit of the doubt ever.
You got a license for those chickens, Danny. That's Bear. Sometimes you are so funny, sir. But look, we actually have a priest saying, "Will someone not rid me of this priest?" That's what he's doing here. All he has to do is put it out there. It won't take many people to do something terribly violent, because a lot of folks, they're not prepared to take things to their end. I'm going to quote something, Chris, and you're going to know what it comes from. The question is not how far. The question is, do you possess the Constitution and the depth of faith to see it through? And there will be ugly things that happen, because there are going to be more and more people like this pastor that just float the idea that just say, hey, remember that time Jesus flipped over tables in the temple? Hey, remember that time Jesus said, I bring a sword, not peace? Yeah, you remember that? I'm just saying, oh, we're just having a theological discussion. We're just talking about morality.
Do you have the depth of faith to go as far as is needed? I'll tip her. I have not watched Boondock Saints in far too long.
Now that I'm not a young man full of piss and vinegar, I wonder if that movie still holds up.
I'm sure it does. But it's been a while. I know the second one does not. I never saw the third one. There was a third one, right?
There's not a third one yet. The third one, the third one has been. Troy Duffy has tried, but he wants to make a movie where the Saints have had such an influence on society that copycats have started to emerge, which I think would be a great flick. But just there will be violence. This is what they do. They push back, and because they believe they're on the right side of history, that phrase itself is a red flag. Oh, do you want to be on the right side of history? Well, if you look at things in a broader historical context, you could make the argument that murdering baby Hitler is a good idea because he's going to grow up to be Hitler.
Correct.
And
that's the right side of history argument. But I mean, let's be real. We haven't seen the Democrats this mad since we took their slaves away.
Yeah, and that caused a war. And look, yes, I know any historians watching, I realize the Civil War was an incredibly complicated thing that happened, and that Lincoln was basically a tyrant that way exceeded the authorities of the president. Yes, I know, but the joke is there. Okay.
Yeah. Real quick, Danny says, Jesus Christ also said, turn the other cheek, love your enemy. He did say turn the other cheek, but he did not instruct you to turn a third.
Yeah, he didn't say stand there and let your ass get beat.
Exactly. Now, I want to jump to this other story. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. I just want to make a statement. I want to watch the clip and make a statement about it. We talk about it for a little bit, but I'm about ready to wrap it up and get on with the day. But I want y'all to see this.
What I'm thinking about and talking to, my friends at Democracy Defenders and.
So real quick, this is Jamie Raskin. This is the guy that went to the book signing where he said Donald Trump will not be the president, and if he wins the election, we will not certify that vote. He basically went and said, we have a plan as the Democrat members of the Senate to invalidate the election if Donald Trump wins it. That's this guy, Jamie Raskin.
And other lawyers about is, could there be a nationwide class action lawsuit to follow up on last week's victories against Musk, against the Trump administration for this breach in computer security and the data of all American taxpayers? It could be a class action suit on behalf of all Americans if the Proud Boys.
Right there. A class action suit on behalf of all Americans. How dare you? But really, file that lawsuit. And then here's what I want to see. If Jamie Raskin files a lawsuit on behalf of all Americans, right? That language is in the suit. Then we need to file a class action countersuit, because that is tantamount to a government official in his official capacity taking an official action by which he is compelling you to speak. He is making a statement on your behalf officially, as an official in his official capacity, in clear violation of your right to free speech. Because remember the cake story, right? You will
bake the cake, you bigot.
But you have the freedom of speech and the freedom of expression, and that includes the freedom not to be coerced or compelled to utter expressions that you are not interested in uttering. You cannot be compelled by force. This is what made Jordan Peterson famous. Is he said, "I will not be compelled to use words against my will." He was even it was
willing to do it voluntarily.
Yeah,
he just wasn't being
voluntarily. Like I'll use a preferred pronouns to be polite to somebody, but if the law requires me to, then I will protest that law. And if that means I go to jail, then I will go to jail and I will go on hunger strike. I will continue to protest that law. That's what made him famous. And I'm right there with him. Compelled speech. You could put me in a firing mood, but you're not going to make me say things I don't want to say.
Whenever I see something like this, I'm at the point now where I'm waiting on the other shoe to drop. What's really going on? But you have to know that this is a loser of an issue. So why are you really going to engage with it? What are you actually attempting to do here?
I think what you're really seeing is the Democrats. So the Democrats have always been better at one thing than the Republicans. There's one thing that they've always been better at: organizing, putting together groups, crowds. They are a hive mind organization. But the thing about a hive mind, a swarm of bees, an anthill, etc., a hive mind entity has a leader. There's a queen bee, there's a queen ant, there's a boss, there's a central organizing principle. And they don't have that. They have no leadership. And so their minds simply can no longer function. Basically, they are the old iOS, right? They are an old iPhone, and Apple has stopped sending updates to that model. You need to go your ass to the Apple store and buy a new phone.
They're NPCs that don't understand you've already beaten the boss.
16-year-old original iPhone 1 is no longer going to play Angry Birds. I know you liked your little video game where you threw the zombies around, but we don't update that anymore. You're shit out of luck. You're going to have to learn to play Poggle or something.
Well, all right then.
So, yeah, if Raskin files a lawsuit on behalf of all Americans against the government that we just voted for, fuck him. If I can't find an attorney to file the class action, I'll go take the bar and file it myself.
I think this is one worth watching. It's probably nothing. Raskin has proven to just be wrong. But
well, he's a yappy little chihuahua that's praying a Saint Bernard can hear him, but there's just not one coming.
Well,
he's chewing a bone. He's in the backyard. And he's deaf.
And look, Chihuahuas can bite hard enough to take a chunk out of you.
They can.
Like they can. Okay, just because you can punt it like a just because you can punt it like a football doesn't mean it can't take a toe with it when it goes. And I
love that we both went to the same joke.
Well,
it is hard to punt a Chow or a Saint Bernard. Yeah.
Like that's what happens when you know somebody for 30 years, I guess.
This is Serindalgore, my Great Pyrenees. Give that a kick.
I'd still say watch this because I've lived long enough now where things start out as one way, where just as an example, the Patriot Act was supposed to let us spy on terrorists, so there was never another 9/11, and somehow that turned into the Obama administration spying on Donald Trump because he was an imaginary Russian asset. And
always remember, there is nothing so stupid a Democrat won't do it.
I'd say
I'd refer you to the Tide Pods.
I would just say watch this story. probably
Yep.
nothing. Raskin, man, Raskin is a ship without a captain right now. But at the same time, that anytime the left gets the court involved, they do it with a purpose. You know, Thurgood Marshall said, "You do what you think is right. And then you let the law catch up." So just be careful with this one. That's all.
All right.
I know you got to go. I know I have to go.
Yep. It's been a great show. We appreciate y'all watching today. But we're going to go ahead and wrap it up there. Thanks for watching. We love you, and we will see you tomorrow.